Willkommen zum Dialog zum Grundrechten. Es ist schön, Sie virtuell begrüßen zu dürfen, um ein sehr wichtiges Thema zu besprechen, nämlich Grundrechte in Europa. Wir können uns glücklich schätzen, dass wir Grundrechte haben. Aber haben Sie das Gefühl, dass Europa genug macht, um unsere Grundrechte zu schützen?
Es geht um die Grundrechte in Europa und wir möchten gerne heute von euch erfahren, was ihr darüber denkt. Wie steht es eigentlich um die Grundrechte in Europa? You have the chance to raise your voice and tell us your concerns.
Sie haben die Gelegenheit, heute Gehör zu finden und uns zu sagen, was Sie meinen hier und heute.
Okay, wenn wir uns duzen. Ich bin Damla, ich arbeite als Journalistin beim Westdeutschen Rundfunk und freue mich, euch heute durch diese Veranstaltung zu führen. Das ist, wie ihr seht, eine bilinguale Veranstaltung, deswegen switche ich im Moment noch zwischen beiden Sprachen. Aber ihr könnt euch eigentlich zurücklehnen, denn ihr seid, wenn ihr jetzt zum Beispiel Deutsch sprecht, gerade im deutschen Raum und könnt auch später eure Fragen auf Deutsch stellen. Well, I'm switching between English and German now, as this is a bilingual event, but you can relax and lean back. And if you want to, because we have simultaneous translation, so if you want to post your question in English,
Wenn Sie Ihre Fragen auf Englisch stellen möchten, dann können Sie das gerne machen.
Herzlichen Dank an unsere Simultanübersetzerinnen und Simultanübersetzer, die das dann auch ermöglichen. So, today you have the opportunity to raise
Heute haben Sie die Gelegenheit, auf Deutsch Gehör zu finden, im Hinblick auf Ihre Gedanken zu Grundrechten. Wir haben das große Glück, dass Michael Flaherty dabei ist.
Gelegenheit, eure Bauchschmerzen mit uns zu teilen, wenn ihr an die Grundrechte in der EU denkt. Was kann man verändern und vor allem, wie kann man etwas verändern? Wir möchten euch heute die Bühne geben. Das alles könnt ihr nämlich hier direkt bei Zoom besprechen mit Michael O'Flaherty, dem Direktor der Agentur der Europäischen Union für Grundrechte. Michael O'Flaherty was established professor of human rights law and director
Michael Flaherty war Professor für Menschenrecht in der Nationalen Universität Irlands in Galway, war Mitglied des Menschenrechtskomitees der Vereinigten Nationen. Und dieser Mann, der so viel weiß zu Grundrechten, möchte gerne hören, was Sie zu sagen haben und was für Sorgen Sie haben.
Professor auf Lebenszeit für Menschenrechtsgesetze und Direktor des irischen Menschenrechtszentrums der National University of Ireland in Galway. Er war Präsident der Nordischen Menschenrechtskommission, Mitglied des Menschenrechtsausschusses der Vereinigten Nationen und Leiter einer ganzen Reihe von Feldeinsätzen für Menschenrechte der Vereinigten Nationen. Also dieser Mann kennt sich mit Grundrechten bestens aus und er ist total interessiert daran zu erfahren, was eure Sorgen sind und was ihr dazu zu sagen habt. If you want to change something, you have to raise your voice, and your contribution today will be part of the upcoming Fundamental Rights Forum next year, where civil society organizations, politicians and human rights experts will discuss solutions to fundamental rights challenges in Europe. Euer Beitrag wird also heute nicht einfach irgendwo im virtuellen Nirvana versanden, sondern es wird Teil des kommenden Fundamental Rights Forum im Oktober nächsten Jahres sein. Da werden dann nämlich Organisationen der Zivilgesellschaft, Politikerinnen und Politiker und Menschenrechtsexpertinnen und Experten über die Herausforderungen bezüglich der Grundrechte in der EU beraten. Nothing is off topic, but we would especially like to hear your views on how to make sure that everyone can enjoy fair and equal access to education, jobs and healthcare, how to tackle hate speech, racism and disinformation, especially online, and how to reduce divisions and help everyone take part in society. That's what we'd like to hear from you. Ihr könnt also über alles, was Grundrechte betrifft, heute mit uns sprechen. Wir würden aber gerne vor allem über folgende Themen mehr von euch erfahren. Wie kann man beispielsweise erreichen, dass jede und jeder einen fairen und gleichberechtigten Zugang zu Bildung, zu Arbeitsplätzen und Gesundheitsversorgung hat? Und was kann man gegen Hassrede, Rassismus und Desinformation tun, vor allem online? Wie kann man verhindern, dass eine Gesellschaft sich spaltet? Wie kann jeder an der Gesellschaft teilhaben? Das alles möchten wir heute mit euch diskutieren und vor allem eure Ideen und Gedanken dazu erfahren. First, I would like to wrap up some housekeeping rules which I'd like to share with you. Please rename yourself by clicking on your name on the right-hand corner on Zoom so that I can address you directly and correctly. And if you want to raise your voice, then please first raise your hand virtually. At the bottom of the window on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a button labeled Raise Hand. Tap it, send your question in the chat, and wait for a backstage request from our team, who will be inviting you to a Zoom breakout session to prepare your public address. And please try to be in a quiet space, have your headphones ready, and make sure the lightning doesn't come from behind you. If you want to pose a question but not speak publicly, then simply use the chat and put your Zoom to non-verbal feedback so that we know you prefer not to take the floor. And please keep the chat free for questions. If you want to encourage somebody who is taking the floor, then you can use the Zoom reaction of applauding, for example. Simply push the applause emoji on the right-hand corner. And in case you're not ready to take the floor live right now, but want to record a video statement, then use our video booth app, where you can record your opinion and thoughts, which you can find on our homepage. You can follow the discussion on social media and engage using the hashtag #RightsDialogue. Now, very, very warm welcome to Michael O'Flaherty, the director of
this meeting is being recorded.
Rights Agency. Michael, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Damla, thank you very much indeed, and I'm really delighted. This is the first time we've ever done anything like this at the Fundamental Rights Agency. So for us, it's an experiment, but it's a really necessary one. We've got to hear from everybody. We've got to hear from people in Europe so that we can shape the responses within the job of our Fundamental Rights Agency to make the most impact. Fundamental Rights Agency's job is to provide advice to the EU and to the EU member states so that they are compliant with fundamental rights in whatever they are doing. But for that, we need to have a much better feel of what's going on. We've got to understand what the issues are on the streets of Europe. In particular, we need to hear from young people. You are the majority of the people in Europe. I'm really pleased that a majority of the participants today are under the age of 30. We need to listen to you. We don't include you half enough in what we're doing. And we're aiming, as Damla said, to a key event next year in October called the Fundamental Rights Forum. It's not that we did it before, we've done 2 of them. We never did one which is going to be blended, virtual and actual, like it'll be next October. This is going to be the conversation we need to have, everybody in the room, online or physical, so that we can come up with the smart outcomes about decent education, decent jobs, proper social welfare, respect for Roma, for all the other minorities, handling the migration situation in a respectful way. You name it. The issues go on and on and on. But it'll be a core purpose of this Fundamental Rights Forum next October to get smart new ideas triggered by new conversations. Policymakers with people in education, civil society with the arts, religious groups with people working on the front lines of the tough issues, the business world with everybody else, you name it. This is today the beginning of that conversation. So I'm looking forward to some great exchanges, and I'm here mainly today to listen. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. It's really great that the contributions made here today will be setting the agenda for the Fundamental Rights Forum next year. And in a Fundamental Rights survey, 88% of the people in the EU said that the human rights are important for creating a fairer society. But what does a fairer society mean? A fairer society means that it's a society which is inclusive and not exclusive. A society based on respect for all human beings, where everyone can take part, regardless their age, their skin color, or sexual orientation. So how can we help reduce divisions and help everyone take part in society? Raise your voice, the virtual floor is yours, and we already have some people in line. So the first lineup participant is Celia. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Celia Makula, and I'm a board member of the European Youth Forum, the largest platform of youth organizations in Europe, and we represent millions and millions of young people in Europe. We're also very, very happy to see that the Fundamental Rights Agency is putting more emphasis and focus on youth. So thank you, Michael, for that. Something I'd like to raise, though, on youth rights, or the rights, human rights of young people. We all know about the challenges that young people are facing in the labor market, but the obstacles don't end just there. There's challenges in access to housing, access to education, in health services, and all those rights areas, they're interrelated. So challenges in one area of life for young people, they also serve to reinforce or amplify the challenges in other areas of lives. And of course, these challenges, they also have very long-term effects and impacts. And then if you add COVID-19 to the mix, of course, it gets even worse, and young people have been disproportionately hit by the crisis. What I want to say is we need to move from this needs-based approach of focusing only on what young people need, that we need a housing, we need education, we need employment. We need to move from this kind of rhetoric to a rights-based approach where we as young people are actually recognized as rights holders. Governments have a responsibility to ensure that our rights are realized. So it's not just about what we might need in the short term, but these are actually human rights areas and human rights that currently for young people in Europe are not being realized. So I think the first steps towards a more equal society and for young people is really to strengthen human rights or the space that human rights occupy in our societies, but also recognizing young people as rights holders. And secondly, also to recognize the value that our organizations, youth organizations, play in our societies. We're facing a massive backlash of civil society and civic space. So this obviously also has a massive impact on whether we as a generation are heard in decision making. Youth organizations are playing a massively important role when it comes to ensuring that we as youth are heard. So these are some of the ideas and thoughts we have at the European Youth Forum when it comes to youth rights overall, but I think I'm very much looking forward to the conversations here. This very much is a first steps and a start to the conversation, and hopefully not the end of the discussion either. We have to see this continue, and hopefully also with a greater commitment from the Fundamental Rights Agency when it comes to youth rights, young people's rights, and the fundamental rights of my generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Celia, for joining us. We will listen to a second participant before talking to Michael. So, Irina, you're the next person in line. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Welcome, Irina. What are your concerns or solutions?
Hello, everyone. My name is Irina Spatadu. I'm from Vienna, and I'm a Roma activist and trainer for human rights education. At the moment, I'm working in the Open Society European Policy Institute, where I am working on anti-discrimination policies in the European Union. I would like to thank you, Mr. Flattery, for offering young people this platform to share our views and concerns, and I'm happy to see you again. I had a great time at the Fundamental Rights Agency when I was a trainee there 2 years ago. I will switch to German now, since I want to use the opportunity to be able to speak German.
Feel free to do so.
Thank you. Ich freue mich sehr, dass ich als Vorstandsmitglied der österreichischen Bundesjugendvertretung heute hier die Möglichkeit habe zu erklären, wie wir aus unserer Sicht gemeinsam eine krisenfeste und gerechte Gesellschaft schaffen können und warum es für Kinder und Jugendliche wichtig ist. Bereits vor der Krise haben sich Ungleichheiten immer weiter verschärft. Deswegen ist es jetzt besonders wichtig, denjenigen eine Stimme zu geben, die sonst nicht gehört werden. Wir wollen eine Gesellschaft, die Möglichkeiten für alle bietet, unabhängig vom Bildungsgrad, Herkunft, Geschlecht oder Religion. In Österreich und auch in vielen anderen europäischen Ländern wurde das politische Klima in letzter Zeit immer mehr von Spaltung und Rassismus geprägt. Gruppen unserer Gesellschaft werden
Groups within our society unfortunately keep being attacked. That's why disadvantaged groups need the appropriate support and protection, particularly in situations of crisis. It is the state's responsibility to ensure equality of opportunity. The COVID crisis has yet again highlighted shortcomings in the educational system. Education is passed on from generation to generation. Children and young people from lower education backgrounds have lower opportunities at school and at work. Many schools have now moved online, and for some people that's no problem if they have access to a laptop and to the internet at home. But not all young people have the necessary technology to be able to take part in class from home. But fair access to good education is a precondition for opportunities in society. In addition, now more than ever, we need specific interventions to tackle unemployment among young people. Similarly, the impact of the climate crisis affects some people more than others. That's why alternatives need to be available to all. The specific measures that we demand as a youth organization have been set out in detail, and we feel they also contribute to the youth goals and the sustainable development goals. I really hope that the Fundamental Rights Agency will contribute to their realization, and that they will relentlessly pay attention to the rights of young people so that we can all live in a fair society.
Ja, vielen Dank dafür, Irina. Du hast ja einige wichtige Punkte angesprochen.
Thank you very much, Irina. You've raised a few important points in terms of discrimination and down to equal access to if I can put it that way, equal access to educational opportunities.
Think about the things Celia and Irina have mentioned. Michael, we have to unmute you, I guess.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were calling for me. My apologies. I didn't hear what you said. Do you want me to respond?
Yes, please. So Celia and Irina have mentioned many things regarding how everybody can take part in society, how to foster social equality, for example. What do you think about the things they have mentioned?
Yeah, I listened with great interest. I missed, because I didn't have the translation, I missed much of what Irina said, but I'll respond to the little bits I did hear. But first, Celia made a great point about moving from needs-based to rights-based approaches, and she's absolutely right. We have to adopt rights-based approaches, and we've got to promote rights-based approaches in engagement on the business of human rights of young people. What does that mean in practice? Because it can sound a bit jargonistic. Well, one of the most important things it means is that decision makers have to be held accountable on the basis of clear, transparent plans of action. So in other words, we need to know through a plan exactly what's proposed so that we can hold the authority accountable to what it has committed to. Second, in terms of what it has committed to, a rights-based approach requires that the people impacted, in this case young people, are participants in pulling together that plan. It's not just about giving them something, it's working with them for something. So it's about decision makers, governments, and young people working together. That's a big part of the rights-based approach. And then one other dimension of the rights-based approach, which links into what Irena said, or at least that bit of what I heard from Irena, is young people are not homogenous. It's not just one big the same. There's huge varieties, huge diversity in the community of young people, including people whose communities are much harder hit by the waves of economic downturn, by the waves of COVID than others. And Irena reminded us that she herself comes from a Roma background. The Roma community has confronted a perfect storm in the last year because of COVID. Already, it was suffering the worst experiences of marginalization, discrimination, harassment you could find in Europe already. And then came COVID. We told children, go home, do distance learning. What happens if you don't have a computer? What happens if you don't have an internet connection? We said, go home. But school was the place where some Roma and other children got their only square meal a day. What happens there? I know of some Roma children in some villages in Europe who were relying on school to get drinking water. So this is just illustrative of the extraordinary impact, disproportionate impact that COVID has on some rather than others. And the rights-based approach means that we have to bring that reality out and we have to address it. We have to make priorities. And again, I'm so sorry, I didn't hear everything Irena said. Maybe just, I picked up at the end that she spoke also, she made a link to climate change. And let's keep climate change at the heart of our discussion today. There's a bit of a temptation, including for people like me, to kind of glance over climate change because we're so preoccupied with COVID. But climate change is this vast, hulking shadow behind us all the time. It's not just future threat. It's not just about the flooding of our cities in 50 years' time, which is relevant for young people. I'll be gone. But a lot of the people participating here, you'll be facing this rising water challenge. But it's today. It's the impact on communities, the change in the the way we work. Traditional industries are disappearing. Not everybody is getting reskilled. It's about migrants who are being, in a sense, under pressure to come northwards towards Europe because of the desertification in some parts of Africa, and on it goes. But thank you so much, Irena, for bringing it right in at the beginning of our discussion. Let's keep climate change as I said shadow, but keep it a thread through everything we do today. It's not just the future, it's today.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Irena was really mentioning many topics, and some of them which you have already mentioned. She was also really talking about how to foster social inclusion and how to prevent discrimination and how to have equal access to education, for example. So those are really like big topics, and also the one of the climate change, which is also very important. Irena, do you have another question to Michael?
Yes, so I can see that we are on the line, even if the communication was not 100%. But of course, for us, it would be also interesting to see how our contribution, how our input will be then used to implement the things that we are recommending. So for me, it would be interesting to know what the FRA can really do in this case to increase the voices of the young people when it comes to policy making and human rights affecting everybody. Thank you.
Can I come in on that? Damla, is it okay if I jump in?
Yes, please. The floor is yours, Michael.
Thank you, Damla. Yeah, look, the Fundamental Rights Agency within its kind of function will do what it can. I'll give you an example. One of the things is that when we do our big surveys of the experience of citizens in Europe, the rights holders, what's it like if you're a member of the Roma, if you're in this or that community, what's your actual experience of life? We will always seek to disaggregate the specific experience of young people so that policymakers can pull it out and give it the necessary attention. You mentioned, Damla, earlier on, a recent survey of ours on attitudes to fundamental rights in Europe, attitudes to human rights, attitudes to values. And one of the things we've been able to pull out of that survey is that the younger you get, the younger the respondent, the more tolerant the respondent. Now, you have to put a lot of nuance in that, but that's the headline news. And that's incredibly encouraging. That's a reminder, as if we didn't need another one, that we've got to work with young people to change our societies. Young people are the champions of values. Look at Black Lives Matter. It wasn't a bunch of people my age out on the street. Or if we were on the street, we were following people a lot younger than us. It was young people that led the Black Lives Matter that has led to a transformative moment in the combat of racism, not just in the United States, but right here in Europe. We have an anti-racism action plan adopted by the European Union a few weeks ago. It didn't drop out of the sky. It's a direct response to Black Lives Matter, which itself was directly triggered by young people. So if ever there was an example of how we have to follow young people who will take the lead, that's it. I want to see a lot more of that.
Thank you very much for those remarks, dear Michael. Well, yes, we'd like to know more about you. For example, about other concerns regarding this topic. I see that there are other people in line. For example, Wanda, if I see right. Wanda, welcome.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Ich mache das
Nice
jetzt
to
auf
see you.
Deutsch.
Okay, I'll do this in German now. My name is Wanda, and I'm joining from Graz in Austria, part of the project Know Your Rights. Delighted to be here. From our perspective, social injustice is a really quite deep-rooted social problem, and to address it, we need solutions that are equally complex. A good example for the way this can for the deep-rootedness of the problem in Austria is our educational system. There are, for instance, very little mixing going on in schools. So you've got schools in social hotspots where those who really need the support can't access the support. So the many structural inequalities that are already there in the education system will then spill over into other areas of life. So disadvantaged groups remain disadvantaged. So we've already heard how the COVID crisis has affected disadvantaged groups most. And we really need a multifaceted response. Firstly, we need politicians to grasp the nettle. Politicians need to create fair educational systems that respond to the needs of the individuals. Secondly, we need the media to be engaged, to give a voice to everybody so that everybody can express themselves and be heard. Thirdly, we need projects, initiatives, and structures that contribute to other groups being able to meet and being able to find common grounds, because there's much more that unites us than that divides us. And finally, we collectively, all of us, need to bring to the fore what we have in common and build on that. But for that, we need information, we need awareness. So social cohesion is a joint effort, so that requires social structures which facilitate that, so we can call out inequalities, so we all pull in the same direction, and we can't offload the issue onto individual groups.
Der Vielfalt angesprochen hast, dass tatsächlich auch niemand exkludiert wird und dass einfach auch die Vielfalt tatsächlich gefördert werden muss. Wir hören uns, bevor wir aber zu Michael kommen, nochmal an, was Lisa zu sagen hat. Sie ist auch gerade hier in Line. Lisa, herzlich willkommen.
Hallo,
vielen Dank. Hi.
Ja. Super. Ja, mein Name ist Lisa Hermanns.
Yes, so my name is Lisa Hermanns, and I'm joining for the homosexual initiative in Vienna, and I would echo everything that Wanda said already. And I'd like to raise another few points that are particularly relevant to LGBTQ young people. As a youth leader, and of course also as a lesbian woman, I constantly experience how other people are suffering discriminations, how it's being experienced by many people, and I hear from even the youngest kids being bullied in the schoolyard because they're supposedly too feminine or too masculine, and sexual orientation or identity is used as a term of abuse. For members of the LGBTQ community, that's quite difficult because they are experiencing that rejection, but they might also already know from a young age that they might not fit the heterosexual standard that society promotes as Michael Flaherty already gave me a really good cue in mentioning that the younger people are, the more tolerant they tend to be. So for us, it would be a really important question that to see LGBTQ issues being raised far earlier in the education. So if educators need to tackle that early on in school, that means they have to deal with the issue, have to be aware that they know how to intervene and how to respond when somebody is being bullied for their sexual orientation, and that they can support the normalization of sexual orientations. And the second would be that LGBTQ issues need to be discussed in school, and we're not just talking about biology classes or about sharing knowledge, not just in biology classes, but for this to be covered in all subjects across the curriculum, and that would help us to see more acceptance. And I've just got one final comment on the EU Commission strategy, if I may, just one quick sentence. Yes, so yesterday the EU Commission published its first LGBTQ strategy, the first point of which was tackling discrimination. And in the agency in Austria where the leveling up and the equal protection has not yet been achieved, I would be very keen to hear what the Fundamental Rights Agency can say on that.
Or shall I wrap up?
I'm sorry, Damla, was that to me?
Yes, this one was to you.
I'm sorry, we keep losing the beginning of sentences. Could you repeat that, please?
Okay, yes, sure. Lisa was mentioning, yes, LGBTQ topics, for example. How can we, for example, raise awareness at school for LGBTQ topics so that we promote living together in a society full of variety?
Okay. Look, thank you. And first let me say hello to Wanda and Lisa, because I think we're all in Vienna. Is that right? So here I am sitting in my apartment, and you're probably only a kilometer away. So it's great to talk with you both. And in a way, you touched very similar topics. Let me start with Wanda and the schools and getting a better mix in schools. We couldn't agree with you more. Where we've been looking at this is, for example, with regard to Roma, again, where in some parts of Europe we have what we call de facto segregation. It's not an explicit formal policy, but that's what you end up with because you don't put the smart initiatives in place to make sure it doesn't happen. And you can have that in a number of other contexts as well. And we agree with you. A school with a diversity. Listen, you know, society is fantastic in its diversity. What makes our societies rich is how different we all are. And they'll stay rich if we invest in our differentness, in honoring it and respecting it and living together in that diversity. And our schools should echo that. So at the Fundamental Rights Agency, within the limits of our mandate, that's certainly something we try and achieve, even though we don't have a kind of a broad transform education across Europe role. That's not our job. But then moving then to the LGBTI, LGBTQ issues, and thank you so much for raising them. As I guess you know, we do the lead surveys in Europe on the experience of what it's like. We published just a few months back the largest study of its kind ever done anywhere in the world on what it's like to be LGBTI. And we need this evidence base because, and this is in a way I'm answering your question, what are we going to do? One of our primary jobs is to put the evidence base out there so nobody can say, oh, we didn't know. or we didn't realize, or it's not here, it's there, it's everywhere. And our hard evidence makes it difficult to shy away from that. And that brings me to this fantastic strategy that was launched by the European Commission just yesterday. That the evidence base for that strategy, in large part, is our survey work. And so we really welcome it, and we look forward to working with all the different partners to bring about its ambitious goals, including for much better respect right across society, including in schools. And Lisa, you said it's not just about talking about this in biology class. Of course not. Of course not. It's in every aspect of our schoolrooms, including those bits of education where we teach on respect and investment in our diversity. And in how we live together in all of our complexity and all of our identities. So couldn't agree with you more. And we need to listen a lot harder to people like yourself so that we can also understand how we can play an ever more meaningful role in delivering these social changes.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your remarks. Thanks a lot. Well, prior to the meeting, we got quite a few recordings from some of you via the video booth. And let's listen now to what other people say regarding variety and equality, for example. Let's listen to those videos now.
Gesellschaftliche Spaltungen wird es immer geben, und das ist.
There will always be division in society, and that's normal in democracy. But the more important question is, how can we establish a pugnacious society where we can discuss these things and how we can continue to educate ourselves, because we have to educate ourselves. And when it comes to racism, the fact that marginalized groups, Black people, people of color, Asian people, more and more participate in the society. And for the majority of the people, this means that things are going to change. Even things that they are used to, for example, terms, the way we call places, laws will change, and so on. For that, it needs an understanding that society will change if more people participate that were invisible so far now. So I would wish more understanding in a democratic living together. Every person is equal, and that's why every person should also have the same opportunities. But in our society, that is not a given. If we just think about that, not everybody has access to all the information. If every person had more information about the opportunities that they have and the rights, and how he or she can actually get involved and active in society, then I think many people would become or want to become part of society and be proud of it too. Proud of participating in society.
I think that we can reduce divisions and help everyone take part in society by reducing barriers. And this can be barriers that are super physical, you know, like, is your building accessible for wheelchairs? Or do you have a bathroom specially assigned for gender neutral people? You know, those kind of things can already make a big difference. And next to that, I also think it's important to not forget the human element. Mental barriers can also be a big part of the problem. Do you feel capable enough to, you know, answer a question, or do you feel really being listened to in a discussion? I think if we start working on this also, it can be already a huge benefit to include more people. Even recording this video for me was a little bit scary at first, but then I thought it's not about the knowledge that you bring, right? It's about your I think that is something we can bring to the table.
Thank you very much for those wonderful videos, well, and for your openness and for sharing your experiences with us. Michael, do you want to say something to these young people?
I absolutely do. I loved all three observations, and I want to react to each of them. In the English translation of the gentleman who spoke first, he said he wanted pugnacious societies. I thought that's such a wonderful term. If it was accurately translated, it's a great expression. It's about vigorous societies where we're not afraid to speak our minds, where conversation can sometimes be difficult and challenging. You know, a respectful, diverse society is not an easy society. It's one where we all have to constantly make accommodations to respect the space of each other in our diversity, within the law, of course. And there are limits. Nobody's denying that. But this idea that meaningfully inviting minority groups into the conversation requires all of us, including in the so-called majority, to make adjustments. And well done to him to remind us. Everybody has to respect the rules, but it's not easy. Then the second speaker there said something that came up earlier with some of the earlier speakers, including Wanda, and I didn't react enough to it at the time. And that was that, and I heard this before, you know, I did a dialogue with young people in Luxembourg last year. The same point came up. It was teenagers in Luxembourg. And here it is in a nutshell. We want to participate, we have opinions, we want to be listened to, but we have nowhere to go where we'll be heard. And that's come up today already a few times. We don't have the meeting spaces. We don't have the rooms which are set up to have the conversations between young people and the people making the decisions. And I think if we took nothing else out of today than that message and brought that to the forum, it would already be worthwhile. Now, the forum is intended to be one of those meeting spaces. It's not an accident that something like half of the participants in the forum will be young people. The other half will be in one way or the other decision makers, policy makers. It's a space where they can listen to each other. But more meeting spaces, more formal meeting spaces. And I look to Celia and the other European youth leaders to also be creative in helping us create such spaces. And third, Rose, who I know, Rose spoke right there at the end about active listening. Now, you might say that's a long way away from what we should be talking about here. That's the sort of thing we should say in more private spaces where we are more respectful to each other one-on-one. But I think she put her finger on something. We also have to do better public active listening. Active listening is listening that's not pro forma, that's not going through the motions. It's about sitting down, being open, and being willing to have your approaches challenged. If I convert that nice human language into policy jargon, it's about meaningful consultations. And just because it's jargon doesn't make it important, make it unimportant. So we have to constantly look and say, can we make public consultations better, more respectful, deeper, more a process of active listening? And that's very topical right now because a lot of groups around Europe are complaining that with COVID and with the disappearance of physical meetings, that a lot of the consultations that have to happen are a bit automatic and a bit shallow. And so let's pay attention to that as well. So thank you to the three speakers for those really helpful ideas.
Yes, thanks a lot also for your remarks, Michael. Well, yes, for me, one of the key messages was really let's live happily together in diversity. And talking of an inclusive society, let's get back to one of the topics also mentioned before. For example, officially we all have equal human rights, so we are all equal in the eyes of the law. But what about social justice? Unfortunately, not everybody on earth has the same access to education, which was mentioned before, to jobs or to healthcare. So which steps can be made, for example, to close the education gap between girls and boys? Or how can equal employment opportunities be promoted? The gender pay gap is just one example. Women continue to be underrepresented in employment while they are overrepresented in lower paid sectors. So those are just a few examples, and we're very much looking forward to hearing what your concerns on these issues or on similar issues are. So the next person in line is Fabienne. The floor is yours. Hello. Fabienne, I'm sorry, but I guess you have to unmute yourself. Hello.
You hear me? Yeah. Okay. I will do it in German. Hallo zusammen. Ich
spreche auch auf Deutsch. Hallo, my name is Fabienne. I'm from Austria, and today I would like to talk about education. I'm a Caliber, and I represent I'm also the vice president of the Kevlar association in Austria, and I think education is something that is a right for everyone, and we really need to see a change there, because kids that are coming from well-educated houses don't have a problem, but those that are coming from a less fortunate situation often have not the support they need, and we need to find them where they are and help them. They are often pushed in an educational career that is not what they want to do. And if they try to do something else, then often they're lacking faith that they will even be able to make it. And I think it's incredibly frustrating. And of course, there are some resilient people who decide that no matter what happens, I will do an education or I will go to university, and they manage to do it too. But it's really a minority only. But what happens most of the time is that they have to repeat a year in school, that they basically being communicated that they should forget about having the opportunity to go to university and just have some simple education, do some apprenticeship. But really, we have to encourage these young people to do what they need to do, because we need young people. We don't want people that have to be adults with 18 having to do a job they didn't pick for themselves, but what we need is young adults who can really choose freely, maybe even as a second choice if you realize your first choice was not the right thing. So really, we need adults who are happy with their choice and able to walk their way with support and without fear, and maybe even at a slower tempo or starting later than others maybe. And also have psychological support, mental support, or even physical if it just comes down to housing. And I mean, this is just a small thing for such a big government, but it's a huge step for a caliber. And every young person has different needs for support, but certainly until they're done with their education or apprenticeship, no matter how long that will take. And then in the end, we will have happy and content adults who will be able to give back to society. So if you invest in people, this is never lost time or energy or money. And please, let's not forget these people. Just because of, especially because of their life experience, we should involve them. Thank you very much, Fabienne, also for your work and your commitment. We also have another person who wants to say something. That's Mathis. We will hear what you have to say before Michael will respond to both of you. Hi, Mathis. Yes, hello. My name is Mathis, and I'm the president of the Luxembourg Youth Council. A big problem, or big problems in Luxembourg, are, in fact, the high youth unemployment, housing that's too expensive, or just an inadequate housing market for our young people, but that is also a topic maybe for another forum. I also think in the beginning I have to say something Michael said regarding participation of young people, that it's really hard in Luxembourg. That's a very interesting topic where maybe we can talk about it later too. In September, the number of youth unemployment was at a record high, about 27%, which of course is also due to the COVID situation. But we also have to be honest and say not everybody is affected the same by COVID. Those who have a university degree can work from home. Youth working in the service area, of course, can't work from home. But this youth unemployment, of course, also starts with education. Our education system, as I'm sure it is in Germany and in Austria as well, which is based on performance. And those who perform better then have a better degree, a better graduation, find a better job with more job security. I don't believe it is still something, especially for youth with a migrational background, that don't have the same opportunities through this building system. Especially in Luxembourg, we have several languages. You have to know, or at least should learn, 4 languages, and especially there, it is really difficult for youth with a migration background to have the same opportunities. Non-formal education and other competencies and skills do not play a part at all. When you look at the evaluation of youth in school, and I think it is time to look more at these competencies and these skills, especially now he's frozen, I'm sorry. We can't hear you. Damla, your mic is off.
Okay, sorry. I had to unmute myself as well. Ja, Mathis und Fabienne, vielen Dank, dass ihr eure Gedanken auch mit uns geteilt habt und dass ihr euch so engagiert. Für alle, die vielleicht...
Sorry. Thank you that you shared your thoughts with us, and thanks for everyone who has joined us now. Like I said, you can participate live, ask your questions in the chat, or participate with a video call.
And discuss possible solutions with Michael O'Flaherty, the director of the of the EU Agency for Fundamental Rights. And your contribution today will be part of the upcoming Fundamental Rights Forum next year, where civil society organizations, politicians, and human rights experts will discuss solutions to fundamental rights challenges in Europe. So please feel free to join the discussion here live. And feel free to post and tweet about the event using the hashtag Rights Dialogues. So, dear Michael, I will just sum up what we've been talking in the last minutes. Fabienne told us that that she's from the youth-led organization Young Care Leavers, who are mobilizing a law that ends financial support for young people when they leave alternative care at the age of 18. As many Australians leave their families home and begin to live independently at the age of 24. And Mathis is from the Luxembourg National Youth Council, from the umbrella organization of youth organizations in Luxembourg, and he's working with young people as well on several areas. So let's now also see who's next in line before coming back to you, Michael. Robin is the next person in line. Robin, welcome. What are your concerns? What are your solutions?
Ja, hallo. Mein Name ist Robin Loh. Ich bin Vorstandsmitglied.
Hi, I'm Robin Loh. I'm head in the Care Leaver Association in Germany, and I can speak very briefly because Fabienne already mentioned most of the topics I wanted to talk about. But one thing I wanted to mention that's really important is that when it comes to children and youth policy, we also talk about the transition into adulthood, because we realize that young people, at least in Germany, but I'm sure it's the same in other countries, they basically drop out of the governmental care system once they're 18 years old, while others can leave their home when maybe they're in their mid-20s. And that's something we have to take into account, because it gives us different starting points. And in practicality, we realize in Germany that a lot of young people, when they're 18 or 19, are still dependent on social aid. They're still dependent on their parents. And they, as a care leaver, it's really difficult if you have not been with your parents since you were 2 or 3 years old, and then you can't really tell the government how much money your parents make so that you can get aid from the government. There are some good solutions so that Great Britain, unfortunately, longer is part of the EU, but if we look there, we can see that they do have a care leaver status. That means that you can get social aid indicating that you're a care leaver, and then you don't have to prove how much your parents are making. And it's also easier, for example, to get into a dormitory, which is not, because they can't just go back home as easily as other young people. Basically, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Robin, that you are talking about the care leavers here so strongly. And we're going to listen to two more. And the next one is from Lena.
Hallo.
Great to hear from you.
Mein Name ist Lena.
Hi, thank you, Lena. I'm from Graz, and I'm glad to be here. Great. What do you want to talk about? What are your worries?
Ich bin weiß. Ich bin
I'm white. I'm an Austrian citizen, and I have an Oriental last name, which is something that a lot of people don't understand. And for many people, that's weird, but for me, it's normal, which is why today I'm talking about something that has become a terrible reality for many young people, which is exclusion because of their religion and their visible confession. And I'm talking about the ban on covering your head in school. So instead of having inclusion, there's another obstacle that is actually only affecting girls in a country like Austria, where the government manages to already basically make it harder for young girls, even at a young age, to get into education. That might not be what they wanted, but that's what happens for many parents, but also for many girls themselves. It's not an option to leave their home without a scarf, so they stay home. They stay home and cannot get integrated. They stay home and cannot get the same education as others. And again, this difficulty is only affecting girls. The lawmakers think that girls and young women are being strengthened through this, but I'm actually telling you, these women are already strong. They already are self-confident. Girls and women don't need to be given a voice. They do have their own voice already. The world only has to listen to them.
Ich könnte eine von ihnen sein.
I could be one of them, but I'm not.
Deshalb spreche ich für die,
which is why I speak up for those who cannot be heard yet.
I could be her, hashtag her clothes, her choice. Vielen Dank.
Ja, vielen Dank, Lena. Du hast auch schon im Chat.
Thank you very much, Lena. You already got a thumbs up in the chat. So apparently there are people out there who agree with you. Thank you very much for that. And I'm sure Michael will address that later. So let's listen to one more person. Nadine.
Hello.
Are you here?
If that's fine, just to balance it out a little bit. So again, thanks for having me, and thank you also, Michael, for already having pointed out that the youth is at the forefront of so many movements such as Black Lives Matter. You also pointed out that the climate change movement is something that always has to be taken into consideration when making decisions. And I would just like to add that because you said you'd like to see more of that as a youth activist and as a conservationist, I can only say me too. I would also like to see more of that. And I see a lot of these things happening. So when it comes to equal access to labor, I would like to point out the importance of resource distribution in environmental work. But I believe resource distribution is the key factor for all mentioned topics. So for example, how come a conservationist who fights against habitat destruction earns much less than bankers and managers who often work in contrary or in the damage for the environment? I am a beekeeper and I have worked on international pollinator projects and on biodiversity conservation. And I also advise the European Commission and collaborate closely with policymakers. And many people like me, despite our academic backgrounds and developed skills, we move from one unpaid internship or volunteering to the next. And there is barely fair payment in fixed contracts neither, because currently nature conservation is fundamentally underinvested. So if access to clean water, healthy food, and shelter are human rights, we need to also create rights for those people who work hard on the ground to guarantee these resources. The fundamental rights to a healthy planet, as well as access to food and shelter, will not be possible without banning fossil fuel subsidies and pesticides and changing the taxation of goods and services, such as, for example, a kerosene tax. The funding and the payment for local and grassroots initiatives needs to be scaled up so we can do our job properly. So now let's get to the solution quickly. What has to happen next is a major redistribution of resources and a proper implementation of the basic rights for all people on the ground, including volunteers and interns in all sectors. So we are just at the beginning of a major economic crisis, and we have seen similar patterns in other sectors for decades as well, such as in the social sectors. So it seems that non-standard work has become the new standard for a lot of young people. My question, therefore, for you, Michael, is how can we work together to tackle inequality in the field of environmental work? And would the Fundamental Rights Agency be open to, for example, drafting a law about the minimum wage for interns in all fields, or setting up basic rights such as health insurance for all volunteers? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow, very important remarks. So from the support for young people over equal access to healthy food to a recent law amendment in Austria regarding the ban of headscarves. So there's a lot to talk about, Michael, and we are really, really interested to hear what you want to say to us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd want to say so much, but time isn't with us. But let me try and make at least one remark with regard to each of those great interventions. I'll start with Nadine at the end. And, you know, you say you're a beekeeper. I can't think of anything more important in the terms of the need for pollination to keep nature vibrant in a context where bees are disappearing. You know, you touch on a point, which was we don't value the jobs that really matter in our society. To take some other examples, who are all those frontline essential workers in COVID? They're among the least paid people in our society. People in care homes, you name it. Did you know that in one country in Europe, the worst paid doctors until this year were in public health, because public health wasn't sufficiently valued? And it took COVID to make everybody understand that public health medicine was absolutely critical to our future. So I just want, you know, a lot of what you say echoes for me. As for the role of the Fundamental Rights Agency, of course, we don't write laws. That's a policymaker's role. We're an advisory body providing support for the institutions. But I'd encourage you, you know, keep making your points. Bring them to Brussels, bring them to the European Commission. We'll continue to generate the evidence and the data which can support claims and arguments, but lawmaking is definitely their job. But watch closely the Green Deal in the EU, this major initiative, which is intended to be a joined up one, transforming the way we think so that Europe can lead on green issues. Lena, again, I deeply appreciate your point about the particular adverse patterns of discrimination against women where they're identifiably members of a minority group. And this absolutely echoes our findings. We know that if you're a Muslim woman, you have a tougher time than a Muslim man. Why? Because you're recognizably Muslim on the street if you choose to wear a face covering. By the way, it's the other way around when we look at Jews. It's a man wearing a head covering who maybe gets identified more on the street and therefore subject to the attack. So the issue of clothing, what you choose to wear, how you choose to present yourself, your identity and patterns of discrimination is an extremely sensitive one that you're very correct to flag. As for your other point, that women have their own voice, they don't need to be sort of given sort of this condescending, paternalistic supports for that. I totally get that. Women are vectors of change in so many of the societies that are facing massive pressure in Europe. So I thank you for that. Robin, great point. You use a specific example of people coming out of care. which is not something we've looked at specifically in the Fundamental Rights Agency, but we've seen more or less an identical issue with regard to migrants who came to Europe as unaccompanied children, received benefits from the state, and then at the day they turn 18, it's all gone. And it's a huge issue in many places. So it's analogous, Robin, but the situations are similar. And have a look at our publications on unaccompanied children and the transition from childhood to adulthood, because we do some analysis and examination there, which you might be able to take and you might find of some relevance. But thank you for raising an important point. Matthias, again, you raise issues of high youth employment, unaffordable housing. I don't have an answer today. You don't expect me to have an answer. What I just want to say is I deeply appreciate what you're saying. And I would say to you, as I would to Fabienne when it comes to education, let's not deal with these just as social issues. These are human rights issues. They're fundamental rights issues, to use the language of the EU. So it's not about the state or society doing you a favor by giving you a job, by giving you access to meaningful education. It has a duty to give you those things. And it's in this context that we're strongly supporting the increasing engagement of the EU on these issues. Now, the way it's doing great work, it's doing, I mean, put it this way, it's doing hugely significant work, developing something, for example, called the European Social Pillar. These are, I often think, awful titles because they don't convey what's really going on. But what they are is they're about all these dimensions of life, a job, social welfare, including for younger people, and really moving along the pathway to turn them from aspirations into rights and entitlements based in law. And that's happening at the moment, and I think it's encouraging. Matthias mentioned COVID. I think I spoke about it earlier. I could talk all day. For the whole of this year, we've been watching the impact of COVID for the enjoyment of our human and fundamental rights in Europe, and it's not a good story. And it's not an equally bad story either. It's a particularly bad depending on your pre-existing vulnerability and marginalization. So if you were already in rough situation, COVID has made things dramatically worse. And please use our material on COVID. We're publishing bulletins every few weeks on the human rights impact of COVID across the 27 EU member states. Take that stuff from our website, use it for your work. And the last thing I'll say about education, and Fabienne, you spoke so compellingly on education. You spoke about how every kid needs a chance to have a second and a third choice. I get that because I'm on my third choice. And I could do it because I came from a family that had the economic means to support me. I had a very patient father who tolerated abandoning choice 1, abandoning choice 2, and finally finding choice 3. So I'm a beneficiary of that because my family could do it. Every child should be supported in the same way. And by the way, it's not just about education because education is a human right. It is. But it's not just because education is a human right, but because we know the better your educational outcomes, the more tolerant you are. We know that from the Fundamental Rights Survey that we published this year. I'm not making a comment about this or that individual, but the more educational outcomes you've achieved, the more committed you are to building up a fair society. I guess because you have a sense that you've been treated more fairly. And so education as a human right, yes, but education for more inclusive societies also. Thanks.
Wow, that was a lot, and this is so interesting, and it's just overwhelming how many comments we get. And you also got some messages in the chat, Michael, which I can say that we can read them maybe later because we're running out of time, and it's really overwhelming how many people want to join the discussion. So thank you very much for this. In regard of the time, I would like to talk more about equal access to education, which is really a huge topic also in times of the coronavirus. So for families who are financially weak, homeschooling can be a big problem as they might not have the digital infrastructure, and we have talked about this before. So while some people don't even have access to the World Wide Web, others, like most of us, I guess here, almost have to take care of their screen times, as many of us are almost 24/7 online. So internet for me personal is a big gain. I can look up many things easily. I can do research as well. But I have to say, this is my profession. I'm working as a journalist and I can easily verify or falsify information. But what about people who don't have media literacy? They can't decide if a certain media outlet is spreading disinformation, propaganda or not. So another drawback on the internet, hate speech. Anyone who is on social media can observe hate speech. And there has been much debate about the freedom of speech, about hate speech and hate speech regulation in the last years, but without a really successful solution. So how to tackle hate speech, racism and disinformation, especially online? Please raise your voice. The next in line is now Nesrin. Welcome. The floor is yours, Nesrin.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do, but we can't see you.
Okay.
Do you see the button on the right-hand corner?
Yeah, it says that the host must give me access so that I can start my camera.
Okay, so I guess we'll get some assistance soon, but maybe you can start speaking and talking to us. Yes, Nesrin, welcome. Hello.
Okay, hi, welcome. Thanks for having me. Can I go ahead in German or? Okay. Gut, dann werde ich auf Deutsch.
Okay, I'll speak in German then. So my name is Nisrin Isa and I'm part of the Federal Council of Muslim Youth in Austria, so an Austrian youth organization, and the subject of hate speech and racism online is a massive concern for our young people. A lot of people are experiencing that, for instance, misinformation or racist hate comments spread really quickly and consequently are very difficult to keep in check for social media platforms, for Instagram. Only yesterday there has been a decision, a ruling to the effect that for the first time ever, holding that where people make utter hate speech, that can be blocked worldwide. There had been no such thing before. Where the legal space is concerned, we're quite far behind still. So my question would be, what would be your what initiatives would you recommend, would you consider important to make sure that internet doesn't turn into a lawless space, so that safer internet is not just a slogan, but something, but a reality where people make sure that hate speech is deleted more quickly?
Ja, vielen Dank, Nesrin. Das sind tatsächlich sehr wichtige Punkte. Wie gesagt, weil einfach auch viele.
Yes, thank you very much, Nesrin. Those are really important comments because a lot of people seem to be almost permanently online, and it's important to be ever vigilant where people have to experience hate speech in that environment. And let's move on then to the next contribution, which again comes from Germany, I believe. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Max Schön, and I'm part of the German Youth Representative Council, where there's a conference that takes place twice a year, where youth representatives from all over Europe meet with politicians. So we've talked about how youth can contribute to public debate, but I would also come back to the question of digital literacy. It's been on the agenda for far too long, and it seems to me that far too little has happened, even though it's burningly urgent again, yet again, because people have never had access to as much information in as short a space of time. We're constantly bombarded with information, and we have to navigate that information and learn to do so. So the impacts of that have also been documented well in social scientific studies. I think we know that young people today spend 50 hours a week online. I completely agree. The internet offers a great opportunity, but we shouldn't treat the internet as a danger as such. The internet is wonderful. It provides wonderful opportunities to access information and education, but that's precisely why I think digital literacy is so important and is a skill that we should respect. We should consider how we make sources of information available to young people these days, because the internet is also a space where hate speech and misinformation can be spread easily. So I think legal interventions can work, but also people's ability to handle information. So I think digital literacy is not just a societal need, but also a basic rights. People need to be able to distinguish fake news from real news, and I've got two demands really. One is, and that's part of the youth conference as well, that digital literacy should be taught in schools for at least 1 hour a week, and perhaps that is also a subject on which the Federal Rights Agency might be able to do more. Then that those organizations who are active in the field of political education for young people, people might be given more opportunity to do so. I hope my internet connection was sufficient for my contribution. Yes, you've come through clearly.
Can we support media literacy?
Again, I think that's a question to me, Damla. Okay, good. Let me jump right in. So thank you very much to Nesrine and to Max. Let me just start with Nesrine and say that I deeply respect what she said. The patterns of hate being targeted at minority groups online, and we're monitoring them closely on an ongoing basis, is truly shocking. And if you have to be a recipient of this junk and this evil stuff to appreciate how deeply unnerving it is for your well-being and that of your family, even when it doesn't convert into a physical attack. So I just want to begin my answer by acknowledging the deepest of respect for that reality, which if you're a Muslim in Europe, you experience every day, if you belong to any number of other minority groups as well. Now, coming to the points made by Nesrine and Max, let me start by agreeing the internet's not going away, and it's fantastically empowering. I mean, this event is happening on the internet. The stuff we're talking about in theory is what's allowing this conversation to take place. So again, nobody disagrees on this, but let's just acknowledge, let's frame the whole thing in fundamentally positive terms. Also fundamentally not going to go away terms. We have to deal with it somehow, not ignore it. Secondly, I agree entirely on digital literacy. An hour a week, I think, doesn't sound like very much. I think we should be mainstreaming digital literacy because we're engaging with the world digitally. Whether it doesn't, I can think of, it's hardly a subject you can deal with these days where there isn't a digital dimension. So if you're studying politics in school, if you're studying sociology in school, if you're studying different aspects of business in school, much of that is either about or through digital tools. So literacy is needed to effectively study those subjects. So I would say, I'm agreeing with Max, but I'm saying not just an hour a week, but mainstreamed as relevant. History, for goodness sake. I mean, if you learned your history through Wikipedia without digital literacy tools, you see my point. I'm not being rude to one particular platform. Then moving on to hate speech, I wanted to hit the different bits of the topics. There's a lot of things I want to say about hate speech. The first is we're very bad at locking up the bad guys. We really are very bad at it. It's a crime. Hate speech, when it passes a certain line, becomes a criminal act in an EU member state. but we have a poor reputation, record rather, of prosecuting it. Why? Look, in part it's because a lot of people don't bring the complaints to the authorities. That's in part because they don't believe they're going to get justice. So we have to work on that. But then when it's brought, we're not always very good at recording it and investigating it as a hate crime. Again, in some parts of Europe, it's better than others, but we've got to do mutual learning. And then ultimately, when push comes to shove, people who break the criminal law should face criminal sanctions. I don't care who they are, be they high up in a government or be your neighbor. Turning to, then I want to go on to two other points, and then I'll stop, because they're all relevant to the topic. It's a complex topic. The next dimension of it is regulation of platforms. We still have a long way to go to get that right. It's a mixture of self-regulation, what we call soft regulation, where the platforms police themselves, but that sometimes isn't appropriate and sometimes isn't what's needed, and there we need law. And so the EU, for example, like a lot of countries, including Germany, is looking hard at the issue of where hard law plays a role in regulating platforms. Now, the jury is out on many of the questions, but the debate has to continue. And then the last, and thanks for putting up with me so long, Damla, the last dimension of my answer is, on top of all of that, we need to regulate artificial intelligence. What's the relevance here? Look, when you see a piece of evil on social media, it's likely that its visibility has been multiplied by an algorithm. That's artificial intelligence. So we also have to come to grips with artificial intelligence and the role of algorithms for the spreading of hate, and then the regulation of all of that. And again, this is something that the EU and its member states are looking at in real time, but again, it's a co-equal part of moving forward. So I'll stop there. It's a complex issue, but it's not impossible. And in fact, I found in the last year we've done a fair bit of successful unpacking of the different bits so that we can start to fix the different bits piece by piece.
Well, yes, that would be great. And those are really very, very important issues. And what you were saying about hate crimes is also what, for example, Melina from Greece has written us in the chat. She has written that there's a lack of information about hate crimes, that there are so many of them, but that nobody speaks of it. So I guess that's really also a problem, and also the regulation of platforms, as you said. Thank you very much, Michael, for all those informations, and I'd like to give the virtual floor now to Numi. Numi, hello. I hope that I pronounced your name right.
No, it's Nomi.
Nomi, okay. Hello, welcome.
Thank you so much for this opportunity and for having me. Yeah, my name is Nomi, and today I will speak as a representative of the popular petition Black Voices Austria. We have currently an ongoing popular petition in Austria with the aim of developing a national action plan against racism on a legitimate and legal level for all people of color in Austria. So all of you who are Austrian citizens can also sign this online or at your local office. We need 100,000 signatures and much more other things, so that would be very helpful. But I will switch now to German.
So we have a petition. We are looking towards the future as a team, as an anti-racist organization. We think these are really important issues
women of color
to look, and it's important to look in particular at women of color. We work in the areas of works, media, representation, communication, health and police. So all these demands are to come together in an action plan on racism. Other countries like Germany or the EU have such an action plan already, but Austria is lagging behind a little bit. And I do believe that structural racism is something we don't hear enough about in the media, and something we don't like to talk about in everyday life if we're not affected by it. So to me, it's the implementation in relation to current problems that matters. So what in particular, Naomi, if I can interrupt you there, what in particular would you like to see, things that aren't maybe raised by the media at the moment? Has there been more with Black Lives Matter now? Is that still insufficient? What do you think needs to change? I was going to get to that. So it's what our petition is about, and I was going to cover that, is that we can speak openly about racism. I think the wide majority finds that subject uncomfortable, and a lot of self-reflection is required, so people might not feel that comfortable talking about it, but I think that's where we need to start. I think it's also because in the German language we don't have certain expressions, but that shouldn't stop us from speaking openly. So what needs to change has to feed through into areas like education as well. But I do believe that on a political level we need action to be taking, so federal legislation to improve the situation of people of color in Austria. So it's important to get together and sit down with people who are affected by experts, along with business, along with public official, and ask, what can we do as a society? Thank you very much for that, Numi.
Black Lives Matter, and that's also what Nomi is talking about. So how can we tackle discrimination, for example? The floor is yours, Michael.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you. Look, the first thing about discrimination and racism is it's not the problem of the people who are discriminated against or who are subject to racist attack. The issue is for all of us in society. And so the first step in dealing with racism, in recognizing the racism inside ourselves, we have to be honest. We have to look inside ourselves and identify that little thread of racism and get rid of it. So the first step in combating racism is a personal step. And we're not saying we're bad people by acknowledging that we have to tackle this ourselves. We're the products of our societies. We're the product of our histories. We have to acknowledge that this is a dimension. So the jargon, I don't like the jargon, but it's kind of accurate. The general population is the problem when we're talking about racism. And so if you want to root out anti-Semitism, you don't focus on Jews, you focus on the general population and its attitudes. And this is really important. Second thing, you don't do anything for people, you do it with people. I spoke about this earlier for young people. I'd make exactly the same point on racism. No society, no government, no organization can do anything on racism if it doesn't do it with people who are subject to racist attack or racist experiences. It's a partnership. The third, and I'll stop at this one, because I can go on these things. But Nomi mentioned action plans. I want to see action plans everywhere in Europe to deal with these issues, because it's only when you lay out your commitments, your objectives, your timelines, your methods, and how you'll measure them that you can really map real progress. That's what an action plan is. And it should be done together with people who are subject to racism, and then it should have these clear moments where you do an evaluation, you do an assessment, and you figure out what adjustments you need to make into the future. Now, I'm not going to speak specifically about Austria tonight, but I have to keep in my mind that when we published a report last year on the experience of being black in the European Union, Austria was one of the countries that didn't fare very well in terms of the experience of racism. So well done to Numi for raising this issue. And please, Numi, you and your organization, use our evidence, use our data to the extent you find it helpful in your work.
You already did. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Well, one could get really lost in a discussion about human rights and fundamental rights. Every single aspect is so important. That's why we'd now like to listen to what Anna has to say to us. Anna, welcome. I pass over to you when you're online, when you're there. Okay, seems like Anna is not there. Is Brigitte already there? I thought that she was lined up. Oh, sorry, now I see, sorry, it was a mistake from my side. Those were some pre-recorded videos which you have sent us before. So let's listen to what Anna is saying to us.
Particularly in times of the internet, of Twitter and so on, every one of us needs to ask themselves what we can actively do. We have to stop downplaying hate speech and have to really take it seriously. In particular, we have to support and stand with those affected and support the fight against hatred. Nobody can look away anymore, thinking it doesn't affect them anymore. Now is the time for everybody to work together to do something. Digital literacy, that's a demand in the context of the digitalization of our society, but digital literacy to most of us seems to mean to be able to create content or to share content or to check the accuracy of information that is made available. But digital literacy also has a social side. In the context of hate speech and radicalization, that is particularly important. The internet, as an apparently abstract and anonymous space, invites people to make baseless statements. That's why online it is really important to be able to understand the social fabric, what creates for a good culture of debate, and what our statements trigger in other people. Increasing social skills is important for a good environment online.
I can't hear anything.
And sorry for those technical hiccups. Yes, very important topics. Anna and Brigitte, thank you very much for your contribution, because it's important to cast a light on how to help people help to face hate speech and how to strengthen the protection of victims of crime, for example, in particular in hate crime. Well, Michael, it's great to see you again. So I would like to know what you think about what Anna and Brigitte have told us, because yes, how can we help people who tackle hate speech? What does the FRA do for this?
Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you for those observations. We're very committed on this. I should start by saying that, and we have been for many years. We're helping indirectly, firstly by helping police forces around Europe to do a better job of recording hate speech. I told you this was one of the problems we've encountered. It's about sharing good practice. Way back, I forget what the point was, but somebody mentioned how the UK was very good at, I think it was about getting people involved in education. And that's the sort of thing we specialize in, finding where an EU member state is getting something right, getting the heart of that, the transferable skill, and then sharing it more widely. And so on hate speech, we play a big role there with the EU member states. Second thing we do is we keep flagging and bringing attention at the member state and at the EU levels to specific problems, one of which is the severe underreporting. Did you know that typically only 1 in 10 victims of an act of hate speech will bring a complaint to the authorities? And this is something we have to keep reminding everybody of so that we adequately gauge the seriousness of the issue. If you rely just on official figures of hate speech, it's bad. But if you realize that only 1 in 10 people are complaining, it's a catastrophe. and it's important that it be dealt with at the level of catastrophe, as a major social drama. France was dealing with its official figures for years, and just the year before last, the French government did a one-off special examination of the reality, and they saw that it was exponentially worse than you could assess from the official report. So again, supporting the EU to encourage people, or rather encouraging people, supporting people to report is very important. For that, by the way, triggers another bit of how we work, which is challenging the prejudice that complainants will sometimes find in the body they go to with their complaint. It was put to me really strongly once by somebody who said, why would I complain about a homophobic act committed against me to a homophobe? And that reminds us that we have to invest heavily in awareness raising and training and sensitization, also in official sources. And then the last thing we do, of course, is we map the patterns of hate speech against certain minority groups. And that's an ongoing story. We've already at least twice mapped the phenomenon for Muslims, for Jews, for different groups of migrants coming from different places of origin, for the Lgbti communities, and this will continue into the future. And so we may not be out there on the front line of stopping the hate, but we're playing, we think, critical roles in enabling all of the others to do their proper job.
Thank you very much. I was also looking to the comments we got. Thank you very much, Michael, for your contribution to those important topics. Well, let's see if we have any other comments, because I mean, I see that we have a lot, and I will try to look through them. And I see that we also have some videos which were pre-recorded. So let's see what Marty is saying to us. We have a video call from him. He's in line. Is that right, Marty?
Yes.
Hello, Marty, welcome.
Just a second. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Marty. I'm from Queerbase. We are supporting LGBTIQ refugees in Vienna. And Michael and I have known each other for quite a while. Thank you for listening to all of us. And I also would like to thank everybody who has been speaking before me, because I think everything that has been said is already quite a big challenge for all of us. My concern is, I know that the FRA has been doing a lot of great analysis of different sections or segments of questions like racism or Roma in Europe or LGBTIQ. And I'm a little bit interested in how to work on the intersections when we know that different minority groups are used against each other. And after the terrorist attack in Vienna, and also knowing, you know, there have been a lot of attacks in France and other places in Europe, I'm a little bit worried to see different communities being brought into a kind of position against each other. So, for example, that there is a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment also in queer communities, in queer white communities, or that queer Muslim that fled to Austria, for example, are now worried about being tackled on all the levels of having homophobic attacks and being called out for being a Muslim and so on. And so for me, and then we notice that governments are jumping on this train to say, like, we are the liberal Europe, we are the good ones, we need to throw out people who are attacking this way of life. And I think it is really important to be very careful about that. what we also see what the Austrian government is producing at the moment on measurements they want to take and throwing out fundamental rights quite easily in the way they talk. So for me, my question is, how can the Fundamental Rights Agency be supportive in doing emergency communication in times of crisis, like after this kind of attacks, for example, that governments are not trying to divide us? And and that's also dealing with what is happening online, what kind of hate speech is happening. But also, I think we've seen it in France, we've seen it in Austria, that there's a lot of governmental speech going on that is pushing us further in these divisions of people that are put in boxes, who are joining this kind of lifestyle and ignoring all the problems we have within our societies. So that's, I think, for me, quite an important issue, especially. And the other thing is that the psychological problems that a lot of people face who have fled here, who seeks security from the Daesh, for example, which are a big part of our community that we are supporting, that they are in this, again, turmoil of being not safe here from the same attacks that they were facing in their home countries, but then having the other attacks too. So I know this is a big issue, but I think we really need to get all these communities that are here, that are also here in the chat together, and to push against these also right-wing moves that we see within the European Union.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Marty. So, yes, let's see who's next in line. I guess it's Saskia. Saskia, do you hear us? Saskia Dimic. Hello, welcome.
I will switch to German. Mein Name ist Saskia Dimic.
Ich heiße Saskia Dimic. Ich bin Roma-Aktivist. I'm a Roma activist and I live in Vienna. And I'm talking today because I'm worried about the hate speech against Roma and migrants, not only in the social media, but I also want to talk about the frequency of racist activities against Roma, and I also want to talk about the different measures for fighting anti-Tiganism, which is a type of racism that is based on ideas of the majority, which has nothing to do with the reality of life for the Roma. And as long as these ideas and Roma don't change, then racism and discrimination will continue to exist. To fight anti-Ziganism, we need strict measures. And in Austria, it is not really being researched in Austria. We need scientific studies as a basis for the understanding of this phenomenon. And also in Austrian politics, society, nobody has not been completely accepted yet. Educational access and available information has to be there for children, youth, and also adults. It has to be made broader. For example, with education on human rights, with workshops against discrimination. And here it's important to really get an awareness out there that this phenomenon exists. Also, the collaboration with civil society, especially with youth from the Roma, is necessary. The new EU Roma Strategic Framework for Equality, Inclusion, and Participation is one of the sources, and the member states need to give even more support to youth from the Roma community in order to counteract that discrimination, among others through measures that make participation in non-formal education and activities outside of school that support those. And we really need a lot of inclusive measures for youth from the Roma community, and these measures are to be checked regularly, just like it should be reported on it regularly and published. And that might fit into the whole internet thing. Thank you very much that you also talk in favor of the Roma community. I would like to take 2 more people. Thank you so much for all of you who are participating also in the chat and also with the video call and who want to be involved. Unfortunately, we don't have space for all of you, but as you know, there are additional fundamental rights dialogues. So thank you very much for all of you who are participating, who also are inputting the question. And it's going to be like we promised, the questions are not going to get lost, but even the questions that are not being read out loud and those that cannot be heard right now will be taken into account, and we will talk about this afterwards. So I'd like to give the floor to Lina. Welcome. I think you're from Germany too, aren't you? Yes, hi. My video has been turned off. I'm sure they're going to turn it back on in a second. So we'd love to hear what you have to say. What are you worried about?
If you like.
Yes, sure.
I'm a climate justice activist from Fridays for Future, so we go and strike on the streets for now over 2 years. And we see also that, especially the climate crisis, it is a physical reality, but it is actually a human rights crisis. And we should view the human rights perspective here from two points. So we know that, first of all, it is caused by destructive old systems like white supremacy, the patriarchy, and other oppressive systems that are causing this complete exploitation of our planet and the people. But also we see that it hits people harder that are already oppressed. So countries, for example, that are already hit by typhoons or something like that, like the Philippines right now, they're not causing the climate crisis. So I would have 3 questions here. First of all, how do we make sure that everyone can become active and make their voice heard? Because right now, sustainable lifestyle, especially as it's a lifestyle, is not accessible to everyone. And also climate activism is not accessible to everyone because you need time and money and you need the resources to know what is going on anyway. The second question is, how do we switch the responsibility again to the people that are actually responsible and not to little schoolgirls? And how do we make sure that politicians start to speak clearly and truthful again about this accelerating crisis? And to people whose actually their job is to protect human rights. And the third question is racism and struggles in the European Union. But how do we make sure that we don't try to solve this from a European gaze? Because Europe, and especially countries like Germany, have a huge responsibility for the climate crisis. And we have to stop the destruction, but we also have to stop building walls. Like, we have to see that right voices that are rising everywhere in the combined humanitarian crisis, which are, for example, going on in Lesbos, in Greece, on the Greek islands right now, in camps like Moria, and they're also stopping further, they're stopping climate action, and they're acknowledging more emissions, and they're fueling this humanitarian crisis that is going all around the world. So yeah, my 3 questions are, how do we make sure everyone is heard? How do we shift the action to the actual responsible people? And how do we prevent only European solutions for a global crisis?
Thank you very much for casting a light on this important topic. We will now listen to Jessica and then get the director's reaction to that, Lina. Thank you very much. And now, Jessica, I pass over to you.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Jessica. I am from Luxembourg and currently working in Vienna at the Ban Ki-moon Center. We are a quasi-international organization empowering women and youth in the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. During the lockdown now of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were advised by the government to stay at home in order to save lives. But what has been forgotten by many is that for a lot of women, home is not always a safe space. Lockdown, social distancing, and economic uncertainty created a spike in domestic violence worldwide, and also here in Austria. With confinement, we have seen an increase of more than 30% in calls to helplines in some countries around the world. According to the World Health Organization, 1 in every 3 women across the globe experience physical and/or sexual violence in their lifetime, and 38% of all murders of women are committed by intimate partners. So here I would like to bring to your attention the Orange the World campaign that the Ban Ki-moon Center is an active part of since 2018. The campaign is spearheaded by UN Women Global and taking place annually from 25th of November, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, up until the 10th of December, the International Human Rights Day. And during these 16 days of activism, the world's most prominent monuments and buildings are illuminated in orange, also here in Austria, in case you have not seen it before. And this represents a future free from violence against women. These 16 days also offer an annual opportunity to raise awareness for the cause with events happening all around the globe, also here in Vienna again. Maybe as a last point, it was only in 1993 that the Vienna Declaration recognized that the elimination of violence against women in public and private life is a human rights obligation. Before that, it was only seen as a form of discrimination. So my question would be, on a European policy level, what more can be done, in your opinion, to prevent violence against women and girls? Because these numbers are still very high and quite unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Yes, it's really important to raise awareness against gender-based violence. Michael, I pass over to you.
Great, thank you very much. I want to go to the chat box first. I haven't read everything, but I saw 2 things that caught my eye. Firstly, Celine writes to say she disagrees with me, saying hate speech comes from people that lack education. You know, I agree with you, Celine. You say there that some extremists are really smart, well-educated people. I couldn't agree more. My point was a different one. I was simply echoing into our conversation our finding from surveys that there's a link between levels of education outcome and expressions of tolerance with regard to society. That's just a surveyed piece of data. It's not a sort of a qualitative opinion from me. I've had to deal with a lot of extremists in my time, many of them with an awful lot of PhDs and so forth. So I just want to say, Celine, we're not in disagreement. I would like to say also to Sven, it's not a big problem or anything, but Sven, you mentioned how many German speakers there are here. We should say this is deliberately, the dialogue is deliberately targeted towards the German-speaking world, and we intend to have similar events for the Francophone and the Anglophone as well. So this is just the first of a number of dialogues with a very deliberate bias towards countries where the first language is German. Now, let me get to the points. First, Marty. And Marty, it's so nice to engage with you in this forum. Indeed, we know each other a long time, and I'm a big fan of Queerbase, which does really important work. Look, you raise a really important point on intersectionality, where I don't have an easy answer today. I just think we have to keep exploring this together. Your point is absolutely valid, but what we do with it, it needs to be a continuing exploration. But let me share with you some learning from the agency, the Fundamental Rights Agency, but also from my previous work. I ran the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission, and there we had to deal with a polarized society, but where people didn't self-identify as one or other, but as complex mixes of both. And you know, so the intersectionality issue was very alive. So what are the 4 headlines? First, personalize. It's about human beings. And when people see the human being and engage with the human being impacted, living in all the complexity of intersectionality, and discover through engagement and dialogue, hey, this is my brother or sister or whatever human being, we can find a space to have a conversation and even build a friendship. And I know Queerbase invests in that, so it's not like it's anything new to say to you. The second dimension of personalizing the reality of who we are in all our intersectional complexity is encounters. It's the point I just made. And we discussed numerous times in the last 2 hours, creating spaces for us to come together in a respectful way. Third, and this relates also to the politics, we need to enable, empower, and create space for alternative voices, different discourse. For every expression of hate, intolerance, and separateness, we have to find somebody with a compelling message of unity in our diversity. And then finally, of my four, and this is just an ongoing learning, it's not the final word, is smart media and investing in upskilling the media. We've invested a lot of work in training media to report in a respectful way on migration. And there's been a huge demand for this work. And again, that's just one topic of many with which we could work with media organizations to develop programs to strengthen the skill set of journalists. Moving to Saskia, thank you for raising anti-Gypsyism. It's a very serious problem in Europe. We delivered a report on it to the European Parliament a few years ago, and it's the first time ever that the European Parliament debated not discrimination against Roma and all these sorts of things, but anti-Gypsyism, hate directed against Roma. It's a very serious problem, and we do have to invest in building awareness. And if I could just say one dimension we could work with is in schools teaching about the Holocaust of Roma, the genocide of Roma during the Second World War. It's very little known outside Roma communities. And I think if we build awareness of that, that will at least play its own role in developing the necessary respectful attitudes. Line, and your numerous points, let me start by saying my deep respect for Fridays for Future based on its impact. I mean, the measure of of your work is its impact, and my goodness, you've had an impact worldwide. So in a way, you know the answers to most of your questions, and it's not for me to give them to you. I want to come to your last question because that gives me something to say. You talked about how to avoid a Eurocentric approach. I talk about this a lot, Line. We have to be Europe in the world. We're not some cut-off separate thing that gets everything right. We have to be in a dialogue, north-south, east-west. I'm going to come in a second to Jessica and the work of the Ban Ki-moon Center, which focuses on the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, I guess Jessica would agree with me that if we want to learn how to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals in Europe, we've got to do a huge amount of learning from the Global South. So Europe has to be Europe in the world, Line, and I'm clear on that. That means we have to have the conversations, Europe with everybody else, to share our common problems. And as for the issue of access to Europe, I won't get into the business of whether Europe should have walls or shouldn't have walls. What it should have is gates in those walls. We need the possibility for people to legally access Europe. And that's where one of the big challenges right now, that even that has been cut off for so many people. So there's a tremendous amount that needs to be done, and I want to express appreciation for you flagging the issues this evening. And finally, Jessica, I couldn't agree more. We at the Fundamental Rights Agency already, 12 years ago, published a European survey on violence against women, which horrified Europe because it demonstrated in an unarguable way, an undismissible way, that we've got a very serious problem of violence against women right across the member states. And I think we all had to be shocked again this year with COVID when the indisputable evidence was produced. And nobody's disputing it, really. Nobody's arguing that it's fake news. It's real. And it's extremely serious. And we have to, I think, what can Europe do? Well, we have to frame our work around the SDGs. Is it SDG 5.3, if my memory is right? This commitment of the world to eradicate violence against women. That has to be a European commitment. And it is. But now we have to deliver on that, working together with everybody from the rest of the world. For that, we need to generate the evidence base That's where the agency will always play its role. And I think we just have to wake everybody up that this is not somebody else's problem, it's ours. And it's not tomorrow's or yesterday's, it's today. And we're still in the middle of the COVID crisis. So we're in the middle of the gender-based violence and violence against women crisis. So I want to thank Jessica for flagging that.
Well, and thank you, Michael, for reacting to all these questions. It's really overwhelming how many people contribute to this event. Yes, thanks a lot for this. And I guess now it's time to tell you that we have a surprise for you, as we do have 3 lined guests from the European Commission's representations in Berlin and Vienna and Luxembourg. Mr. Wolfgang Bogensberger, he's the deputy head of the European Commission's representation in Austria. Welcome, Mr. Bogensberger. The floor is yours now.
Hello, hallo, können Sie mich verstehen? Ja.
Can you hear me? Okay, and see me too. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate here. I thought it was really, really interesting, this first dialogue. I learned a lot, and I can take a lot with me. A lot of topics were mentioned, and I want to concentrate on just a very few of them and leave the rest to my colleagues from Luxembourg and Berlin. Could you move your camera a little bit down so we can see you better? Maybe a little more centered. Okay, this is pretty good. All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you. The 3 topics I would like to talk about were hate speech, racism, and disinformation. What can we contribute from a European level to treat these phenomena better than we were able to so far? We are at the beginning of a digital decade, and as Max rightly pointed out, we have to get better information competence and skills. So what can you do with hate speech? Basically, it all starts for you that everything that is forbidden in real life has to be forbidden in on the internet as well. That's something the Commission already said 4 years ago with the most important platforms, with Facebook and so on, and they set up a codex of behavior, and it said whenever they get reports on hate speech that the platforms have to look at it very quickly and then remove it. Since in 2016, 28% of the content that was reported were deleted. By now, it's actually gone up to 80%. So it's improved a lot. And where this is not possible, you have to go to court about it. And yesterday, there was a decision of the Austrian court based on a decision by the European Court of Justice. And basically, the result was that Facebook had to remove globally hate speech. So not just in the German-speaking world, but it's not only about words, but it's also about the meaning behind it. So that's a significant improvement. And the first step is done in that regard in the legal sense. And I know it's going to take a lot more steps, but the Commission will present a law by the end of the year for the digital services, and that will be included in that. The second thing that Nomi mentioned is the action plan regarding racism is really important. Racism and xenophobia is actually a crime in all of Europe, and we have to find out where the system works and where it doesn't, and why it doesn't work where it is. But what's really important is that over the legal regulations beyond, you have to really fight against racism in everyday life, because it really does a lot of damage, not just to the individual victims, but to all of humanity. And the third point is disinformation. That's a direct attack on our freedom of speech, because in order to be able to build my own opinion freely, I have to know that the information I get is reliable. And that's a continuous challenge where everybody has to work together, all the players, all analysts, everybody, all the fact checkers. You have to identify this early and then delete it. There is a codex of behavior as well, and that has gotten us to the point where Facebook and Twitter in the first quarter of the last year deleted millions of accounts that were just bots. So a lot has been done already, but there's still left to be done. So we're still on it. We're doing it for you, and we're doing it with you, as I would hope it would be. Thank you, Mr. Bodensberger. It's good to know that you're actually doing your homework. Mr. Koffelberg of the
Koppelberg.
Thanks a lot, and thanks to the FRA. I will focus on 3 points, like Wolfgang did, on inclusion, gender equality, and the fundamental right to environment. Inclusion, just to say that also here in Luxembourg, we as representation of the Commission, we are fostering the debate on non-discrimination. Yesterday the new Lgbti equality strategy was launched, like as Lisa from Graz mentioned. We already launched Commission Action Plan Against Racism in September, so that is the framework. To just give you 2 examples of what we are doing. We participated actively in the Luxembourg Pride Week back in July. We organized webinars with experts, and now we're organizing an upcoming movie night with the Europe Creative movie, I'm Not Your Negro, for those who know this film. It's not known enough, that's why we want to focus on this again. To Michael, Michael, we do use your data. In November 2018, the FRA published a survey, Being Black in Europe, with alarming data for Luxembourg, and these data were very much referred to in the framework of the demonstrations we had here on in the framework of the Black Lives Matter protests. Gleichheit. Gerade vor einer Woche, genau vor einer Woche war der
Exactly 1 week ago, we had the Day of Wage Equality, which is the day in the year where statistically women work free. It still is a fact that women are still making less money in the European Union than men, on average 14% less. In Luxembourg, we're doing actually pretty well with 1.4%. It's almost wage equality, but for Austria and Germany, the numbers are really horrifying. It's more than 20% difference at the very bottom of the list. So we have to act quickly. Get rid of that, because the principle of wage equality has been part of the European contracts for the past 6 years, and we still haven't managed it. But we're working on it in the European Commission, and this year the strategy for equality for men and women in Europe has been set up. We have set up some measures, and in the coming weeks we will have measures for wage transparency, and because we still need that, because women often don't know that they have the same conditions. And then we also had a suggestion for minimum wages, because they can also contribute to removing or reducing the difference in wages. And the last part is environment. Maybe not all of you know this, but in the European Union we have a right to environmental protection. It's Article 3 of the Charter of the Fundamental Rights of the European Union, and you have to know your rights. If we don't know our rights, we can't claim them. So we do everything in our power to make sure that by 2050 Europe is the first climate neutral continent in the world, and we hope very much that several countries will follow our example, and we want to have at least 55% less emissions. So there's a lot to do and lots of different ways to get committed. We heard a lot of examples for really strong commitment, participation, involvement. What's important is for everyone else, if you're not as involved, is that you go vote at every level, if it's at the communal level or the governmental, the federal level, also on the European level. And of course, vote those politicians that represent our situation, and that's something somebody else said too. But we also have to make them accountable.
Linking up young people with decision makers, for me, is personally a call to action. And as representative of the European Commission in Luxembourg, we will try to support this, at least in our constituency, Luxembourg. And I think we have good chances to young people get in touch with politicians. Mathis Godefroy, if you're still there, Mathis Godefroy from Luxembourg, let's work on this together. We will link up. And the very last word, this is exactly the aim of the Conference on the Future of Europe, which the European Commission has proposed and which will take place basically next year with the European Parliament and the EU member states. Active listening, again, this has been said, active listening by EU decision makers, and then translate this into concrete political action. So thank you already in advance for engaging in this upcoming Conference on the Future of Europe by giving your voice. And thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Stefan Koppelberg. Vielen Dank, und ich hoffe, dass Mathis tatsächlich da noch mitbekommen hat, was Sie gesagt haben. Jörg Bohan, Head of the European Commission's Representation in Germany. Schön, dass Sie auch noch dabei sind. Und ja, Sie haben jetzt das Wort.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Time is quite advanced, so I'm not going to go into any particular details. Let me just highlight one overarching element which I think is very important, and because it's very timely to talk about it, the rule of law. All these fundamental rights can only work, they can only function in a country or in a region where the rule of law prevails. If it doesn't, if there's no enforcement, if there's no awareness in the public administration amongst decision makers, then all the fundamental rights are just written on paper, and we would have a hard time enforcing them. And as you've seen this week, the EU lawmakers have found an agreement on how to better enforce the rule of law in the European Union, and I hope this will also become law and help us to better implement the fundamental rights. But this is the only thing I wanted to add here on the content level. More important, I just want to thank Michael. I want to thank the Fundamental Rights Agency for their great work, for their great support for us, for our colleagues in the Commission who are policymakers and the enforcers of European law, also EU-wide. We really need your expertise. And as Michael made it clear, we don't need only the expertise of the experts, we need the expertise of you, of the activists, of the young people who are really, really committed to these causes. I'm always trying to illustrate it with this, look how strong the influence of farmers is in the EU, because if they have a concern, they take to the streets, they make their voices heard, and we have seen with the environmental movement, climate movement, if young people take to the streets for environmental causes, for climate changes, then their voices are also. Thank you for this forum, thanks a lot, and all the best.
Thank you very much, Jörg Bohan. Well, Michael, I guess there's now a lot of outcome from the last 2 hours, which will feed right into the upcoming Fundamental Rights Forum, right?
Absolutely. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's late now. I'm not going to say much. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the representatives from Luxembourg, Germany, and Austria, all the participants. The chat box is buzzing away there. We're capturing everything. This was the beginning, the start, an experiment. I think it went very well indeed. There'll be more dialogues leading up to the forum next year. I hope that everybody who's participating today will find a way to stay engaged with us. But it's been really great, very stimulating, very challenging. Personally, for me, I felt like I was in a 2-hour oral exam. But but it's been really valuable for us all at the agency. So thank you to everybody, and with you, Damla, and everybody at the Fundamental Rights Agency, I wish people a great evening and a lovely weekend.
Yes, thank you very much, Michael. Have a nice weekend as well, and thanks for your time and for your reactions to all what the young people had to say. I hope that everybody has enjoyed the fundamental rights dialogue. As we said before, unfortunately, we were not able to give the floor to everyone, but the FRA will take them all home. And as said before, this is not the end. So thanks for joining us, and thanks for all your concerns and for your ideas. Have a wonderful weekend and see you soon. Bye-bye.
So, wie können wir gesellschaftliche Spaltung abschaffen und gewährleisten, dass jeder gleich an der Gesellschaft teilnimmt? Nun, ich glaube, es ist wichtig, dass jeder gleich in die politischen Geschehnisse mit eingebunden wird und auch mitarbeiten kann und auch mitdiskutieren kann. Gerade bei uns Jugendlichen ist es so, dass wir von vielen Gesetzen, Entscheidungen und Regeln betroffen sind, jedoch nicht aktiv gleich an politischen Entscheidungen mit teilnehmen können. Deshalb eine Möglichkeit wäre es, zum Beispiel das Wahlrechtsalter auf 16 zu setzen. Somit können ein größerer Teil der Jugend auch in der Gesellschaft teilnehmen.
The internet reflects what's happening in society. I believe that many young people turn to online hate speech because they feel disadvantaged or underprivileged or quite simply left behind when compared to others. And the internet offers a very easy and anonymous way to voice these concerns and to find somebody who listens. But what I think we should remember is that many of these problems and many of these concerns are rooted in real life grievances and in real life problems. And it's the duty of political decision makers to ensure that young people grow up in an environment that leaves no one behind. This is not the answer to all forms of hate speech, but a lot of messages posted online hold much deeper roots. Yes, we should report posts that are offensive, and yes, we should create counter narratives, but we should try and see what lays underneath these messages and take them seriously.
In ihrem Jugendziel Nummer 8 über gutes Lernen erkennt die Europäische Union an, dass ein umfassender und gleichberechtigter Zugang zu guter Bildung durch die Mitgliedstaaten gewährleistet werden soll. Trotzdem sehen wir heute, dass es immer noch Jugendliche gibt, die aufgrund des sozialen Hintergrunds ihrer Eltern nicht die gleichen Bildungschancen haben wie ihre Mitbürger. Gerade die Corona-Krise und das resultierende Homeschooling haben gezeigt, dass Kinder aus finanziell schwachen Haushalten oft benachteiligt sind, da sie zu Hause ganz einfach nicht die digitale Infrastruktur vorfinden, um dem Kursmaterial zu folgen. Folglich müssen alle Mitgliedstaaten und auch Luxemburg sich dazu verpflichten, jedem einzelnen Schüler Internet und Computer oder Tablets zur Verfügung zu stellen, sei es öffentlich oder privat.
Ist ein sehr großes Thema, wo wir uns seit Jahrhunderten beschäftigen. Wir sehen fast jeden Tag, dass eine Person auf der Straße, in Arbeit, im Bus und so weiter diskriminiert wird. An diesem Moment können wir uns für diese Person einsetzen. Rassismus passiert auch sehr häufig in sozialen Medien. Da können wir diese Person blockieren und melden. Die Auswirkungen von Rassismus sind Diskriminierung und Menschenrechte wird verletzt. Und das Wichtigste ist, dass wir nicht gleiche Chancen haben, wie zum Beispiel in Arbeit. Wir werden nicht wegen unserer Bildung beurteilt, sondern wegen unserer Aussehen, Religion, Nationalität und so weiter. Was wir tun können gegen Rassismus, ist, dass wir in Demos teilnehmen können, wir können in sozialen Medien mitmachen und das Wichtigste und Leichteste, aber gleichzeitig das Schwierigste ist, dass wir einander akzeptieren und respektieren.